Hello, today we're going to finish up section 8.7. We are going to be solving equations by factoring trinomials where the leading coefficient is not a 1. You already know how to solve equations when you factor. We factor, use the zero product property, set each factor equal to 0, and solve. We expect to get 2 answers each time. You also learned how to factor trinomials where the leading coefficient is not a 1 by using the A times C method. So together we're really just putting those 2 skills together today. So if you look at the first question, it says solve each equation. In question number 1, we have to make sure that all of our terms are on one side of the equation and the equation is set equal to 0. So you should start by subtracting 7x from both sides and subtracting 3 from both sides to move everything over to the left. When we do that, we get 8x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals, there's nothing left on the right side of the equation, so now it's equal to 0. Once we have our quadratic in standard form or descending order, we can do our factoring. Since this is a trinomial, the leading coefficient is an 8. We're going to use our A times C method. So if I were to multiply the leading coefficient of 8 times the last term, negative 3, A times C, 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Here we need the factors of negative 24 that add to the middle term that add to negative 2. So factors of 24, 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. I can get the last set of factors, 4 and 6, to add up to negative 2 if I make the 6 negative. 4 times negative 6 is negative 24. 4 plus negative 6 is negative 2. So that's my pair of factors. Remember that we use those factors to split the middle term into 2 parts. So 8x squared doesn't change, but now negative 2x gets rewritten as plus 4x minus 6x. Then the negative 3 equals 0. Now that we've split the middle term, we have 4 terms, so we can factor by grouping. Group together the first 2 terms, factor out their GCF. So here the GCF is 4x. When I divide each term by 4x, I'm left with 2x plus 1. In order to get the same leftovers when I factor the second group of terms, in order to make sure I get 2x plus 1, I have to factor out their GCF of negative 3. Be careful when you have to factor out that negative number. Once we've factored each group, now we have that common parenthesis, 2x plus 1. When we take that from each of our big terms, our leftovers are 4x minus 3. That goes in another parenthesis. And then to finish solving, we set each factor equal to 0 and solve the 2 equations. I'm going to go over here. 2x plus 1 might equal 0. So that would mean 2x equals negative 1, which means x is negative 1/2. There's our first answer. And then our second answer from the second factor, 4x minus 3 equals 0. That would mean 4x would equal 3. And when you divide by 4, x would be 3/4. Please leave your answers as fractions instead of decimals. It's okay if they're improper fractions, just make sure they're reduced. Okay, when we take a look at question number 2, so we're still solving our equations. We still need to have all of our terms on one side of the equation in descending order. So again, let's start by moving that minus 65a over to the left and the minus 18 to the left side. When we add each of those terms to both sides, we should get 7a squared plus 65a plus 18 equals 0. We have our trinomial leading coefficient is not a 1, so we're going to use the a times c method. When I multiply 7 times 18, I get 126. We need the factors of 126 that add up to the middle term of 65. So I have 1 times 126, 2 times 63, and I'm going to stop there because I found the pair that multiply to 126 that add to 65. We use those factors to rewrite the middle term. So we have 7a squared plus 2a plus 63a plus 18 equals 0. Now we do our factor by grouping. The first two terms have a GCF of just a. When I factor out that a, I'm left with 7a plus 2. The second set of terms have a GCF of 9, so I'm going to factor out a positive 9, and I'm left with, again, 7a plus 2. Then we factor our common parenthesis, so each term has a 7a plus 2, and when we take that away, we're left with a plus 9. Everything is still equal to 0, so our final step is to split, set each factor equal to 0, and solve. So here we have 7a plus 2 equals 0. When you subtract 2 from both sides, 7a equals negative 2. And when we divide, a should be negative 2 over 7. Then we set our second factor equal to 0. So a plus 9 equals 0. And when we solve, a should be negative 9. Okay, let's do one last example. In question number 3, we have 6x squared minus 11x minus 10 equals 0. So we're going to solve. Our terms are already in descending order. They're already on one side of the equation. Our squared term is positive, so we can go ahead and factor right away. Since we have a leading coefficient of 6, we use our a times c method. So when I multiply a times c, 6 times negative 10 is negative 60. We need the factors of negative 60 that add up to negative 11. So factors of 60, 1 times 60, 2 times 30, 3 times 20, 4 times 15. I'm going to stop there. I've found my factors. 4 times negative 15 is negative 60. 4 plus negative 15 is negative 11. So I found my pair of factors. Now I use them to rewrite the middle term. So I have 6x squared plus 4x minus 15x minus 10 equals 0. Since we have 4 terms, we're going to factor by grouping. In the first 2 terms, the GCF is 2x. And when we divide out 2x from each term, we're left with 3x plus 2. From the second group, we have a GCF of negative 5. Again, be careful with that negative. So when I divide out the negative 5, I'm left with 3x plus 2. Factor again, so we have a common parenthesis of 3x plus 2. and a leftover parenthesis, 2x minus 5. Everything still equals 0. Now we can split, set each factor equal to 0. If 3x plus 2 equals 0, then 3x will equal negative 2, which makes x negative 2/3. And when 2x minus 5 equals 0, 2x will equal positive 5. And our second answer, x is 5/2. For homework tonight, there are 10 questions, 9 questions attached on the next page. Please make sure you show all of your work for full credit. If you have questions, please let me know. I haven't been receiving a lot of questions, and I'm here to help